Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's our first big video here for the year 2020. Happy New Year to everybody. And it is with my sincerest apologies that we've actually gotten backed up with our content. But that's only been due to the weather here. It's been on and off with the rain here in Sacramento. And as you guys can see, I brought my Corvette out today. So today we're going to be doing a review on my Corvette Z06. So one of the first things that we're actually going to get started on is we're going to talk about the main thing that everybody sees when they first look at a Corvette in the first place, and that's going to be the body lines. The body lines for the C6 are actually probably the main reason why I actually bought this particular Z06 in the first place. And not to mention, buying it in black, I think it just made it that much more cooler. As you can see, the black just brings out the body lines all the way around. And another thing, as you guys may also see in our other previous videos of the Z06, we also did take our time to add the ZR1 side skirts and the ZR1 splitter in the front, which gave it that much more of an aggressive look. So needless to say, about 6 months after I've owned this thing, I'm still in love with it just as much as the first day that I bought it. Now moving on, we're gonna actually talk about the big topic that a lot of Z06 owners and a lot of C6 owners won't really get into. You'll hear a lot about it, especially if you've done your research right up until the time you're getting ready to purchase. And we all know that happens to be the head problem with the LS7. But even 6 months after owning this thing, I haven't heard, had, or even felt a single issue with the car. And with that being said, my biggest upgrade right now going forward would be simply the tires. But for those of my car guys that do actually like to take the extra step, dealerships do offer what's called a PPI, which is a pre-purchase inspection. You can have that done at any local dealership to check out your Z before you even think about purchasing. So guys, I said all that to say this. If you're one of those Corvette guys that are actually scared of the LS7 head problem, I would say don't worry about it. As long as you plan in the future to get the heads worked on, get them checked out, get them fixed, there's nothing to be scared about when purchasing this car. And now moving on to the main reason why anybody buys a C6 Z06 in the first place, right? It's because we have that beautiful LS7 7.0 platform sitting right under that hood, ready for you to let go, get down on the throttle, and get down the road. And with those beautiful red engine covers, 505 horsepower, 470 foot-pounds of torque, you're ready to go. So moving on to the rear storage area, before we get started, I actually like to take the time to thank DMV for finally getting our plates in. We are finally established with the name Venom Z06. And with the rear storage area, as you guys can see, we have a lot of room back here, enough to definitely fit 2 suitcases. If you and your significant other are ready to get away on a grand weekend, you can definitely do it with this car with no problem. So another thing that absolutely sold me on this car was I cheated on my modifications list. I actually bought the car with an upgrade. And that upgrade happens to be this beautiful Corsa Sport exhaust system. I mean, just looking at it is one thing, but wouldn't you guys like to hear it start up? I know, beautiful, right? Let's actually hear a rev. Maybe the first time at, say, 3,000 RPM. Now let's kick it up a notch. Let's say 5,000 RPM. So now that you got to see the car's goodies, let's take a tour of the interior. So before we actually get going on the road, I'd actually like to talk about the interior. A couple things I like, a couple things I dislike. So first thing I want to get into is actually how comfortable the C6 is. I'm 5'10", 165, and I have plenty of room to operate in here, especially for a sports car. Now starting with the seats, they have excellent side bolstering for when you take your car out on the track and you're entering a hard corner. You're actually be well planted here in the seats, but the thigh support is where I feel GM wanted to make it more suitable for any driver. And moving on to the center console, you have a nice armrest with a decent sized storage compartment. You do have climate control, and you also have an in-dash display here. And GM even took the time to make decent sized cup holders. Now overall, I do like the center console, especially with the two-tone gray trimming that we do have here. That actually changes with the 08, as they do have almost like a carbon fiber type of look to that trim there. Now it does come with a nice shift knob,
pretty standard e-brake here, but the two issues that I do have with the center console is, one, the shifter is actually pretty close to the steering wheel. I mean, it does take some getting used to, especially if you're used to driving other vehicles where it's a pretty good or a pretty decent distance between the steering wheel and the shifter. And secondly, I know I might be being a little picky with this, but the in-dash radio display is pretty outdated. But I mean, 07, it was definitely great technology for its time. So I mean, there's really no complaints there. Plus, you know, that's something that we can always switch out at any time. And now with the gauge cluster setup, I actually like it. That was actually one of the main selling points that sold me on this car here. Kind of gives you a 3D effect with pretty much everything jumping out at you, from the temperature to the oil temp, to the battery voltage, to your odometer, your speedometer. I mean, everything with this gauge cluster setup is phenomenal. Now, being that your focus and attention as a driver is pretty much straightforward from here, the only other eyesore that I have with this interior is the steering wheel. And again, you guys just might be calling me nitpicky, but I mean, for me, that's a boring steering wheel. I mean, if you're gonna buy a top-of-the-line model C6 Corvette Z06, you're gonna want a little bit more flash for your buck. Now, a couple other awesome additions that GM made to the car is, one, the Bose stereo system, which sounds great. I know in a couple other videos I may have said that I don't like a sound system in a sports car or race car, but in this car it actually suits the car. It's not overly loud, it's not overly boisterous, it's just right for the vehicle. And secondly is the toggle system on each side of the gauge cluster here, which is definitely driver focused. I think that was one thing that I like that GM actually nailed. You can cycle through your functions, whether street, race, or track, I believe. It actually makes the driving experience that much more fun. Now that I've gave you guys a grand tour of the interior, let's get going. And oh yeah, one other complaint. GM actually produced this key fob here, which I guess at the time this was pretty cool looking. Does have the push to start function. However, this thing looks a little outdated. You can get an up-to-date one, which I believe they did alter these and change these around to the newer, nicer, fancier looking key fobs. And I believe that I can replace this, so I will be replacing this. So, foot on clutch. Oof, it's nice there. Alright, e-brake. And we're off. So one thing after purchasing a Z06, you'll notice that the clutch feel is actually pretty good. I actually like it. It's not too heavy. It doesn't feel like it's too light. It's just perfect for the car. So that's one thing that GM, I feel, did dial in when they made this thing. So while we're sitting here waiting to turn at this light, a couple things about the car. I did purchase the car out of the Bay Area, I believe in Hayward, for a pretty decent price, which was another key selling point on the car. But the car had decent mileage at the time. I believe it only had 40,000 miles, which is pretty great, especially for a C6 2007. You expect the mileage to be up there in maybe the 70 to 80 range. But when I saw that this car was at 40,000, I mean, that was a steal, especially for the price. Now, surprisingly, with the C6, it's not as wide as you may think. Going down the road, you're not, you know, squeezing down a lane or fighting to, you know, make room. It's a pretty decent size. Even when you are pulling it into the garage at night, of course, depending on the size of your garage, if it's one or two car garage, you still have a lot of room, which was one of the fascinating things to me when I got to sit in the cockpit for the first time. And another thing that I feel a lot of car reviewers or car enthusiasts don't touch on with C6s or Corvettes in general is the visibility. The visibility in this car is amazing. You definitely have that wide nose and the wide fenders up front, that it is very smooth. It's not notchy, it's not super sophisticated, it's not hard to get into gear. When you get on this thing, it goes. So you're gonna need to shift pretty quickly, pretty accurately, and that's another thing that I feel that this car, it's there. It's there, guys. So yeah, I mean, definitely excellent job on the shifter. So right now we're cruising in third gear, cruising along the river here. Got a nice stretch of road, not super bumpy. The car handles amazing, guys. I can't go into detail enough about how well that this car is planted. Now, if you've seen any of the other videos, you'll notice that we did lower the car on stock bolts. And I actually feel that that made a tremendous difference in the handling. I mean, it's pretty much dead on. I mean, it's very direct, it's very nimble on its feet, despite you having that 7.0 liter transplant up front with the LS7 motor. This car handles amazing, especially in corners. Only thing is it will step out on you. So you do have that traction control here with the center console. If you do want to get a little crazy, I suggest you have good tires. But for the most part, this car is great. It stays on course. It will not deviate too much from anything that you really put it through. I mean, when you get on the throttle, it goes. When you turn the wheel, it's gonna turn. I mean, this car is amazing. I will say I'm glad I bought it. So I will say, whether you're going to go down the street just to go to the store to go get some groceries, or you're stepping out on a Sunday afternoon with your significant other and you guys just want to cruise, this is the car to do it in. I can't stress that enough. This car is phenomenal. Man, we have a lot of traffic up front. So what I'm gonna do, guys, is I'm actually gonna turn around and we're gonna get on it a little bit. I'm gonna do a few pulls for you guys. All right, so we are turned around now, and that's just first gear right there. I mean, that Corsa exhaust in the back is screaming. This road right here is pretty beat up, so let me get up a little bit further here. Now we're in third, and man, that's amazing. I mean, that was just half throttle, and I mean, it puts a smile on your face just like that, guys. Just my thoughts after 6 months of owning my Z06. I do have some good and bad feedback. Not necessarily bad, but just some things to kind of be wary of. Positive thing, I mean, as you guys can see, this thing is full of power. There's really no issues. Like I said, I mean, with the steering, with the clutch, I mean, the shifter, I mean, everything, once you get used to it, once you get settled in, I mean, everything is pretty much dialed in and everything's on point. Now, the negative I will say when it comes to this car is, we've already talked about it, and that is the valves, or the valve train. I would definitely get the heads done as soon as possible. I have not had mine done yet. I don't even know if mine have been done from the previous owner. That's not something I looked into, but if you are looking at owning a Z06, a C6 especially with the LS7 platform, I would definitely look into getting the heads either done, checked out. I mean, then that's pretty much all I would have to say that's really negative about the car. I haven't had too many expenses so far as brakes or tires or anything like that, just because we're getting ready to go do a transformation with the Z06 over the winter. Gonna add some things, gonna make a few upgrades. I look forward to changing the wheel and tire setup on this car. I'm not gonna stray away too far from how the wheels look now. I actually think they look pretty good. Just as I mentioned before in previous videos, chrome isn't my thing, especially with a black car. It's not my look. So that's what I would have to say about that. But other than that, the car itself, man, I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything else at the moment, especially for the price that you can get these things at now. I mean, to get this kind of performance out of a car at that price, I mean, it's remarkable. And that is the big reason, like I said, as to why I purchased the car, because at the moment I was looking more so in the direction of a GTR, which those things are still pretty pricey. But like I said, you can't beat this thing. You cannot. So if you're looking at owning a C6, Z06, this is definitely the way to go. If you're looking for almost supercar potential at a third of the cost, I mean, it's a no-brainer. Really quick, just one thing to add for our channel is we are going to be switching our content from every Thursday to about every weekend, either Saturdays or Sundays, just because it works better with my work schedule. So that's pretty much going to wrap up today's video. It's our first car review of the year. It's a big one for me because it is my car. And I thought I would share something special with you guys before we head into this transformation, like I said, with this car. And that's going to be huge as well. So